Welcome everyone, this is Brother Doug with Brother D. We're about to do another mini little video, so we're about to jump right in. Matthew chapter 7 verse 12. Therefore, whatever you desire for men to do to you, you shall also do to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Okay, so let's start with that, Brother D.
All right. Christians will try to use this to say, you see, the law's been done away with. All you got to do is do unto others what you would like for them to do unto you. That's all that matters. All right, just at a first glance, because the first way you do scriptural interpretation is by observing what you observe at the first glance. You have to observe first what you see with your own eyes immediately at the moment. That's where we all start. And you try to use reason and common sense. So reason and common sense, first of all, says there's nowhere in this verse or around it that says the law has been done away with or destroyed or nailed to the cross. Okay? Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. 18, 19, and 20. We did a video on it. Go watch it. So first glance, it doesn't say that. Number two, this is part of the holistic message that the Messiah taught about this subject. Now we can go into another scripture to talk about it. Or I can stick with this for a little bit. Let's stick with it for a little bit, okay? Therefore, whatever you desire men to do to you, you shall do to them. So you treat others the way you would like to be treated. That's fairness. That is fair. That's love. Okay? If I don't want somebody to treat me harshly, if I'm humbly coming before them and asking them questions, and I don't want them yelling down my ear, I'm not going to do that to somebody else who's genuinely and humbly asking me a question. I'm not going to yell to them down their ear. But if I come arrogantly to someone and I'm yelling, my personality, me personally, I can expect them to yell back at me. I expect that. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not going to feel bad. Some other people might. That's why they won't yell, because they don't like to be yelled at. So that's a principle. Treat people the way you like to be treated. But let's go to what the whole message is. Brother Doug, if you can help me out, whoever finds it first. Sums up the commandments. Let's see if I can find it. Yep. That's the one I wanted, Brother Doug. Good job. Hangs. Matthew. Matthew 22, my brother. Yeah. So you got to get the whole context, okay? This is not the whole message. This is part of a message that the Messiah taught. Why is it coming in Matthew 7? Is this chronologically in order? Perhaps it is. But I'm just trying to tell you, this is not the whole message. That's when biblical scriptural interpretation goes wrong, when you just take one verse and you make a doctrine out of it. Now, all we got to do, Brother Doug, is just love our neighbor. We don't got to love God. We don't have to love Yahuwah. Just treat our neighbors right, and we're going to get into the kingdom. Everything's going to be all good. No, you're missing other scriptures. That's where we have to now go outside and go to some other scriptures. And here's one example. I got one. Is it Matthew? 22, yep.
Okay, so we're going to go to the verse Brother D was just talking about. Verse 37, yep. Yeah, I'm going to start at 36, actually 35 to get the context. One of them, a lawyer asked him a question, testing him. Verse 36, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? So they're asking him the number one, basically the most important. Yahushua said to him, You shall love Yahuwah your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Most important one. That's number one. Not loving your neighbor. That's number two. And then it says, verse 38, this is the first and great commandment. So he's telling them this is the most important. Number 39, and second, so this is number 2, likewise is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Number 1, number 2. Verse 40, the whole law and I love how the web says the whole law. Not just the 10 commandments, the whole law and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments. All right.
Now, we're going to do a video on this all by itself, but this is a great one because common sense, observation, critical thinking, first observation should say, wow, there's 2 parts to this. Loving Yahuwah God and then loving your neighbor. The 2 must go together. It's a package deal. And what does it say at the end? The whole law and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments. Or some scriptures will say, hang on these 2 commandments. My common sense question is, if something is hanging onto something else, doesn't that mean it's attached to it? So if the law is attached to these 2 greatest commandments, doesn't that mean that the law is still applicable and not done away with? That's just common sense. That's how you annihilate and destroy any Christian that tries to come at you with Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, and say that all you got to do is love your neighbor. And you see Jesus is changing the law here. No, he's not. It doesn't say that in the text. And when I look in the context of what he said, the whole entire message, he says, love your neighbor and love God, Yahuwah. And both of those hang on the law and the prophets. So that's the end of that video. Very short. Doug, I want you to end with those verses you have regarding lawlessness and what the law is and how good it is, sound doctrine, all that. And then I'm going to give mine, and we'll end the video.
If I remember correctly. Okay, it's 2 Thessalonians chapter 8 I'm starting at. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom Yahusha will kill with the breath of his mouth and will destroy by the manifestation of his coming. Verse 9, even he who is coming according to the working of Satan with all power and signs of lying wonders. And verse 10, with all deception of wickedness for those who are being lost, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Psalms 119, 142. Your law is truth. Verse 11, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 11. Because of this, Yahuwah sends them a working of delusion, that they should believe the lie. Verse 12, that they all might be judged who didn't believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness.
Hallelujah. Let's go to Matthew chapter 23. Equivocal proof that the law has not been done away with. Besides Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 to 19 and to 20. Matthew 23, verses 1 to 3. Messiah spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Moses. What is the seat of Moses? If you look it up, it is a place where teachers teach the law of Moses. That's their job. That's their occupation. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Supposed to be. Verse 3. All things, therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, observe and do it, but don't do their works, for they say and they don't do. In other words, they're not preaching the law of Moses correctly. They're not loving Yahuwah, and they're not loving their neighbor as their self, just like the Messiah said here in Matthew chapter 22, and partially in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. They're not doing that. They're not following or fulfilling or walking in or completing the law without hypocrisy. They're hypocrites. So observe what they say as far as when it comes from the law of Moses, but don't follow what they do, because they're hypocrites. That's verse 3. Okay? And so for the Christians out there who tell you, oh, you're not really following the law, you're a hypocrite. You're fading your hair on the side. You're not supposed to be having a fade. Listen, you laugh at those guys and you say, well, guess what, bud? Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 to 3 says, even if I'm a hypocrite, you're not supposed to be following me. You're supposed to follow the law of Moses. And guess what? You have a Bible. You have the whole book. So you are without excuse because you actually have the book. So even if I'm a hypocrite, you still have to obey what I'm saying, bud. That's what you tell them. That's how I say it. Some people don't like it, but it's too bad. Matthew chapter 28, the last one, because Christians will say, oh, Matthew 23 was written before the resurrection, and that was before the new covenant, and that was before Jesus nailed the law of Moses to the cross. Okay, well, you say, okay, so he had to be nailed first, right? We'll go to Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. This is after the resurrection. Yahusha, verse 18, came to them and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. That's a lot of authority. Verse 19, go and make disciples of all nations. That's Chinese, Indians, you name it. Everybody, all nations, Israelite and non-Israelites alike. Immersing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the set-apart Spirit. That's the name Yahusha. He embodies all of them. Yah saves. Verse 20, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. Teaching them to obey all things, all means all, things that I have commanded you. Commanded is past tense. That means everything that I taught you in the past. Question. Was the Messiah just talking about what he commanded them after his resurrection, which was just a few days? If so, where are the gospel letters for that? Where are the letters of the message that he taught after the resurrection? And if that's the case, then we should only be following that. Forget about everything else. Forget about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John before the resurrection. We don't have to obey any of those commandments because he wasn't resurrected yet. No, that's foolishness. Don't let the Christian deceive you with that lie. It's a desperate attempt to say that the law has been done away with. And here's the truth. Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 to 3 was part of his ministry and part of his time when he was teaching. And we should obey everything that he taught. And part of it was to obey the law of Moses without hypocrisy. And with that, we're going to end. That's an explanation for Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Shalom.